Well, howdy everyone. Today I'm looking at Canon's popular 85mm f1.8 USM lens. This is a slightly older design nowadays, but it's still very popular as a portrait lens, especially on cameras with the common APS-C sized sensor, like my Canon 60D, where the long focal length lets you get quite close to people's faces without distorting their facial features. The wide maximum aperture of f1.8 lets you get your background nicely out of focus, even in quite tricky situations. So in a way, this lens is an interesting alternative to the 50mm f1.4, but for people who are more into portrait photography. I love the build quality of this lens. It's solid and weighty, but not too heavy, and the glass looks really pretty. The focus ring is very smooth and slightly damped, better than my 50mm 1.4. The USM autofocus motor is very fast and quiet, as you can hear. And generally, I found it to be quite accurate. So all in all, the lens is a pleasure to use, especially considering its medium price. Now, the 85mm focal length is really zoomed in on an APS-C camera like the Canon 60D. This makes the lens a little harder to use, as you need a faster shutter speed to get a sharp picture, around 1/100th of a second, and the tight perspective makes it a poor lens for everyday photography. So for those reasons, a lot of people prefer to buy a fast 50mm lens. But the 85mm lens is undeniably a better lens for portrait work, or picking out your subject or particular details in a scene, like on this car. And if you are taking pictures of someone on stage or at a sporting event, the longer focal length of the 85mm lens would be far more useful. The lack of image stabilization and the long focal length will make this a hard lens to use for video work. Your footage will be really quite shaky. However, if you can stabilize yourself using a tripod or even just a cushion, you can get some real nice results. Let's look at the image quality. With the aperture wide open at f1.8, this lens is impressively sharp. Lots of detail is being resolved, the colours are nice, and chromatic aberration is more or less under control. The lens has almost no distortion and little noticeable vignetting on my Canon 60D. However, there is one considerable problem, and that is purple fringing. It's most visible here in the windows and on other contrasting edges, although you can even see it in between the bricks and walls. This is a common problem for 85mm lenses, but it's still a real disappointment. This fringing is visible in a lot of images, which means you should avoid using f1.8 on a bright sunny day, unless you're prepared to clear up all that fringing in Photoshop. Good luck to you. If you can live with it though, the image quality really is very impressive at f1.8, although there is just slightly less sharpness in the corners. When you stop down to f2.8, the lens really comes into its own. The purple fringing is gone, there's more contrast, and the lens is sharper than ever. And as you can see, the corners become really nice and sharp. Stop down again to f4, and the image quality is as close to perfect as you can get, from the corners back to the middle. I can't understate this, the image quality from this lens is stellar. All the way down to f16, the sharpness really is superb, although at f22, things get a little soft due to the effects of diffraction. Like a lot of other fast lenses, this lens has issues with longitudinal chromatic aberration. This means that the outer focus areas in front of and behind the plane of focus can take on weird colours. Here's the problem at f1.8. As you can see, there's green fringing in the background and purple in the foreground. It goes away as you stop down to f4, but it can still be disturbing in normal pictures. As you can see, this picture at f1.8 is nice and sharp, but the green and purple aberrations do spoil things a little. Like I said though, this is a common problem for fast camera lenses. But I'd like to make it clear that, apart from the purple fringing at f1.8 and the longitudinal chromatic aberration, we're dealing with a very high performance lens. Even the new 20 megapixel sensor on the Canon 70D won't cause this lens any problems, it's as sharp as it gets. At wide apertures, the picture quality is certainly better than any fast 50mm lens. I think this is the perfect lens for anyone who's really into portrait photography, or who wants to shoot people on stage, perhaps at school plays or concerts. It's also an extremely nice lens for anyone using one of Canon's expensive full-frame cameras, where it'll have a nicely wider angle of view. Anyone more interested in general purpose shooting will probably want a fast 50mm lens instead. An 85mm lens is certainly a bit more of a challenge, but there's no denying that the picture quality and handling of this lens are truly impressive, making this lens highly desirable and highly recommended.